On August 1st, 2022, the Dark Man asked if Steph Curry was the greatest point guard of all time, and the rest was history. Today, Book of Showtime turns 3 years old, and while the last year has been really disappointing between health and technical issues, because of the support of my tremendous scholars, we're still here pumping out videos, and now it's time to celebrate. What's up, scholars? Moira here, and welcome to Book of Showtime Chapter 74. As always, if you enjoy these videos, be sure to leave a like and share with your friends, and if you have a topic you'd like for me to cover for Book of Showtime, be sure to leave it in the comment section down below, or anywhere you can reach me on social media or the Book of Showtime Discord. As is tradition on this channel, we're going to do a special super variety chapter. I really like doing the variety chapters. Now, this is the part where I tell you some special life milestone. You know, year 1 was under 200 pounds and year 2 was a year of sobriety. But since I did my coming out chapter earlier in the year, there's really nothing to report. I'm still slimmer, sober, and sex changed. You know, that didn't roll off the tongue as well as I thought, huh? I will point out though that this is actually my 10th year of doing content creation, and to be honest, it was a lot of mediocrity across everything I've done. You know, my friends are going to patronize me, but you know, before I started Book of Showtime, I basically sucked at everything I did. Let's plays, streaming, podcasting, modeling. It's just been nothing but hot booty on this Gmail account for a decade. But you know what? I think Book of Showtime, I really believe that it is my best work, and I hope to continue doing it for as long as you guys support me. Anyway, before we get into the community questions, let's review some previous chapters and see what opinions or answers have shifted. In chapter 29, we built a wish list of things we wanted to see in WWE 2K24. I asked for Ken Shamrock to be in the game, and he was. Now, that was a selfish pick, but look, Ken Shamrock is one of my favorite wrestlers of all time, despite how short of a time he wrestled. I also asked for multiple cover stars, and we actually got 3, Cody Rhodes, Rhea Ripley, and Bianca Belair, and I think that actually makes Bianca the first black woman on the cover of a WWE game, so congrats to her. Everything else was a complete miss, but hopefully some of these things that I asked for, like a beta or crossplay, make it into 2K26. In chapter 31, we went over some Fortnite collaborations we wanted to see. So I asked for Negan, and we did get Negan, but it was comic Negan and not Jeffrey Dean Morgan Negan, which is strange considering the Walking Dead characters we have in Fortnite are based on the TV versions. I don't know why they keep going back to the comic version of Negan. Rogue Company did the same thing. MLB did get representation. Unfortunately, it was Shohei Ohtani, and I say unfortunately because I cannot stand the Los Angeles Dodgers. Hopefully we do get MLB uniforms though, like we have for the NBA and the NFL. At number 1, I asked for Lady Gaga. That was the main reason I made the video. That was the main skin I wanted, and she did get her own festival season, and I've used her skin about 90% of the time since her release. As for community suggestions, Ben asked for Invincible, and he got 2 waves of Invincible, so congratulations, Ben. And Amy Starlight asked for K-pop girlies, but the K-pop collaboration, apparently it was supposed to be New Jeans. It got scrapped and replaced with Hatsune Miku for Fortnite Festival, so sorry, Amy, maybe next time. In chapter 34, I discussed whether or not Call of Duty Black Ops 2 was retconned. This was disproven with Black Ops 6, and even more so with the reveal of Black Ops 7, because Black Ops 2, if you don't know, is split into 2 periods, one taking place in the 1980s and one taking place in 2025. Black Ops 6 was a direct sequel to what happened in the 80s between Woods, Mason, and Menendez, but it was still up in the air if the events in the 2025 timeline took place until Black Ops 7 was revealed over the summer. The trailer showed that both David Mason and Raul Menendez are alive and are returning. This is weird because the Modern Warfare games, the new trilogy of Modern Warfare games, are now set in the same universe, but the technology in Modern Warfare 3, it's like, how are we going to get from what we have now to what was shown in Black Ops 2 in like 1 year? Huge continuity issues, I know, but Call of Duty only cares about selling skins right now. Have you seen some of the skins in the game? It's like, man, where did the identity go? In chapter 46, I did a tier list for all of the Yakuza or Like a Dragon games. The 2 games I can add now are The Man Who Erased His Name and Infinite Wealth. For the former, I'm going to place it in the C tier. It's not a bad game, but the story isn't that memorable to me, and the combat, you know, after a long time, the Yakuza combat is getting a little stale, I won't lie. Even with the Asian style, this game is just clearly a holdover until Infinite Wealth. As for Infinite Wealth itself, it's an amazing improvement over its predecessor and probably has one of the greatest send-offs for a character I've ever seen. If you played the entire series to this point, the game just hits differently. This is the only open world series I can think of where I just, I want to do almost everything. It's not even for achievements or to get to 100%. It's just all so good. I'm placing Infinite Wealth in the S tier. In chapter 56, we did this or that for NBA players. We debated Shai Gilgeous-Alexander over Luka Doncic. SGA has since won the NBA Finals and the League and Finals MVPs, so while the debates on skill set may still lean more towards Luka since he's not a free throw merchant like Shai, a ring and an MVP really helps SGA's case. Chapter 62 was part 2 of sequel, remake, or reboot. Now, the inspiration for that sub-series was Dead Rising, and Dead Rising has indeed gotten a new entry, a remaster of the original, but the game was rebuilt so much that it's essentially a remake, I gave a brief review of the remaster back in chapter 68, and basically, the game went from something I'd never play again to something I was thinking of replaying before I even beat it. It was great. Capcom, they once again set the standard for remakes. This, Resident Evil 4, and the original Resident Evil 1 remakes are some of the greatest remakes of all time. Finally, we're going to go back a year exactly and talk about the 2-year special. In the thumbnail, you might have noticed that Alice from the Resident Evil movies has the asexual pride flag behind her. This isn't some silly fan headcanon, especially since she has sex in the first 5 minutes of the first movie, but a reference to actually my best friend, Alex, who is asexual. Last year, we watched the Resident Evil movies together, and one time she was streaming Dead by Daylight to me, and she was looping the balls off the Nemesis. So I called her Alice because of the way Alice fights the Nemesis in the movies, and their names are similar. Alex is also one of my most important friends. She spent a lot of nights with me when I couldn't sleep, and she was the first person I told I was transitioning. So she may not talk or shower or use her gadgets in Rainbow Six Siege, but I still love her, and she deserves a shout out. And now my favorite part, and the part you've all been waiting for, the community questions. Let's start with Venetia. She gives me a lot of questions as usual. She first says, with all the game studios being shut down or severely reduced lately, what studio do you think should be shut down, and which one would you love to see brought back the most? This is a crazy question because, well, it is. I don't want to see any game developers close. There's been too many of that lately. Maybe the Wukong guys or the Ready or Not devs, but I think, with all the closures in the industry, it's hard to want more of that. I do, however, want to see a few publishers close, and one publisher in particular is Electronic Arts. They've shut down so many good game studios, locked away so many great game IPs, plus the Battlefield series has been spotty, and the sports games that they put out are very predatory. As far as bringing back a studio, I'm going to be honest, this was a tough one because some studios, I would only want to see them come back for one series. Like, I would absolutely bring back Free Radical Design, which another EA studio, imagine that. I'd like to see them come back just to do Time Splitters, man. Damn, we were so close. I'm so sad Time Splitters 4 got shelved, and I don't know what's going on with Time Splitters Rewind. The last update was a year ago, plus they look to be slowing down because, well, it's a fan project and they have lives and jobs. They were asking for more help, but Free Radical is definitely at the top of that list. Visceral too, primarily for Dead Space. I think Monolith would be a really strong candidate. They would definitely be in my top 5 studios to bring back. They made The Operative, they made the Fear series, Condemned, Gotham City Imposters, and the Middle-earth Shadow games, Shadow of War, Shadow of Mordor. Once again, this is a studio owned by EA. They always shut down a lot of people. I mentioned Visceral as well. That was an EA studio, and I think also Pandemic was an EA studio. They made Saboteur. So EA, they gotta go. All those studios I named, they made a lot of great games. Gotham City Imposters was a very underrated shooter in a market that had Call of Duty, Halo, and Battlefield in their primes. Fear 2, it still holds up today. By today's standards, it's still a great game. It has unique mechanics, and the Nemesis system in Shadow of Mordor and its sequel are now just forever locked away by those games. So yes, EA, they gotta go. She then goes on to say, build a baseball team of video game characters. You can either just fill the active positions or do a full roster depending on how much time you want to put into it. Now, I've actually done this a few years ago. This is actually the precursor to chapter 73. In fact, here's the team on screen that rhymes right now. I'll briefly go over each position and why. At catcher, I got Kratos. The way he throws that axe, just imagine him throwing out runners trying to steal. That would just be a sight to see. He would just be, just get that thing right over there. At first base, Kiryu, he has so much raw strength, so he would provide the power that is associated with the first base position. And he loves hitting the batting cages anytime he's in Kamurocho, so he's got to be on the team. At second base, I had Meg Thomas from Dead by Daylight. You know, she's one of the only athletes in Dead by Daylight. This was more for her speed and defense and base running. I think she'd be a great 9-hole hitter. At third base, I got Max Payne. You know, for the dives, just for the dives on the hot corner. Like, come on, no one dives better than Max Payne. At shortstop, I got Lucio. You know, he's a natural athlete. He's full of energy. He'd be like the Brazilian Jose Reyes. In left field, I got Chuck Green. You know, he's got the athleticism and he swings a bat pretty well. Plus, he's a team player and a leader. He's perfect for baseball. In center field, I have Leon Kennedy, which at this point, do I even need to explain Leon Kennedy's greatness to you? In right field, I have Twitch from Rainbow Six Siege, which if you ever played Rainbow Six Siege, you know that Twitch, she will flick the heck out of her shock drones. And the throw from right field to third is considered the hardest throw, so that's why we have Twitch out there. At DH, we have Coach from Left 4 Dead 2. You know, you always just need that old guy along from the ride on every baseball team. And, you know, once again, he's an athlete. Well, he was an athlete. And he swings the bat pretty strong in Left 4 Dead 2. So you got to have Coach there. Our starting pitcher will be Waluigi. You know, he doesn't have his own game, but he's God in just about every sports game he's in. He's like the Bo Jackson of Nintendo. And finally, managing this entire ball club is Ocelot. And, you know, you have so many personalities from all over. Like I said in Chapter 73 with the video game basketball team, you need somebody who can control this group, this unique group of people that we've assembled. And Ocelot is perfect for that. Baseball can be a chess match of attrition with gamesmanship and craftiness. And Ocelot, I think he's the perfect guy for that. It's also interesting that I've done something like this already, because when you reflect on my content creation career, if you want to call it that, there's been so many things that I've done that would eventually grow into what Book of Showtime is. When you look at the Showtime 7s, the October Selects, the video game sports teams, these are all things I've done before in the past, whether it be on Twitch or on my old YouTube channel. So over time, it's like the seeds were being planted for what Book of Showtime would become, and I think that's pretty cool. She then says the 5 Capcom characters who have had the least amount of sex. Ryu and Dulcim, they seem like safe bets. I think they probably have vows of celibacy, so that might be kind of cheating, but hey, you know, that still answers the question. I don't know how you could be celibate with women like Chun-Li and Manon walking around and Aki. Woo-hoo. The semen in my side would be boiling at the mere sight of these women. That was kind of horrible. Too much? Yeah, let's move on. I'm gonna say most women in Resident Evil probably don't have sex because they've all been infected, and it's not confirmed if any of those viruses in the Resident Evil games can be sexually transmitted. But if I had to pick one in particular from the Resident Evil series, I'd say Rebecca. She probably had sex once or twice and wasn't good at it, so she kind of holds off on it. I don't know why. I get this strange feeling that she gives a blowjob that features like no imagination and a lot of teeth, which is that's a bad combination. Last, and I can only come up with 4, I'm going with Gogadonsis. You know, he is just too locked in on being the greatest swordsman of all the demons, and premarital coitus, you know, that would just be a distraction to Gogadontis. He also probably got various procedures done, like chemical castration and metoidoplasty, just to make sure sex isn't even an option. The only sword he's swinging is his Oni Slayer. Next, who would win in a race to find an ancient treasure? Nathan Drake, Lara Croft, Indiana Jones, Knuckles the Echidna, or Nicolas Cage? I love that she says Nicolas Cage and not Ben Gates, the character he plays in National Treasure. Just imagine Nick Cage being bored and doing this for fun. In fact, they should do that. Hide something and film celebrities trying to use their wealth and status to get to it first. Anyway, to keep this brief, Lara Croft is the pick for me. She not only has the skills and intelligence, but the money and resources to get to the treasures fastest. The only flaw is that she blows up like every 5 minutes, and she's British. Drake has the intelligence and the skills, but he's not as rich as Lara, plus he has a daughter now, so once it gets a little too dicey, he might bow out. Indiana Jones is washed, and Knuckles, he doesn't have really anything going for him here. He can't fly as fast as a plane. He's probably broke. And honestly, the Sonic characters, if you ever seen the Sonic X show, they're pretty stupid. You know, I'm not trying to be mean, but they're a goof troop, all caps. Finally, she asks favorite dinosaur. I can't remember the name of it. I think if you Google, I forgot. I think the dinosaur has 500 teeth. If you Google dinosaur with 500 teeth, I think that's my favorite one. Speaking of dinosaurs, Zeta the Dino Girl says, if you were to direct a movie, what kind of style would it have, what genre would it be, and who are your starting cast? I would like to do a military horror movie set in like an urban environment. Think Saw meets The Raid with like the tension of No Country for Old Men, and how about some elements of 13 Ghosts? You know how in No Country for Old Men there's like no music and the gunfights are very slow and almost quiet with how little the shooting happens? I would like to make a movie like that, something that has the viewers sweating and holding their breath. My cast would include Adam Driver, Walton Goggins, Shawnee Smith, Angela Bassett, Tilda Swinton, and Wentworth Miller. People turned on Wentworth Miller for being gay, but I turned on him for being English. I know his parents are American, but you know, you can't be unborn in England. I'm sorry. And Chris Redfield should have been played by a full-blooded Yankee. Next, Zeta asks, if you can make a Resident Evil crossover, what game or movie would you cross it over with? I'd love to have Resident Evil cross over with Killing Floor. Resident Evil never had a dedicated endurance mode, so merging with a game that's all endurance mode, I need that. Seriously, go play the mercenaries in any game. Imagine if you can do that for like 2 hours straight. It'd be intense, you know, maybe a rest period every now and then, but I would love to be shooting Ganados as Leon for an hour, setting up defenses and all stuff like that. I'd need that. I imagine it would work out extremely well, as Killing Floor is class-based, and all the Resident Evil characters, when you play the mercenaries, they all have their own weapons and moves, so it's perfect. Everyone would do something different. Chris can be brute force and DPS, Jill can lean more towards recon and intelligence, Rebecca would obviously be a medic, and Ethan can go get his hand cut off somewhere. My oldest brother Dennis says, to be honest, I just want your opinion on Tom Thibodeau being fired as the head coach of the Knicks, and do you think Mike Brown is going to keep them as playoff contenders? You know, I like Thibs, but his rotations were really bad, and he got exposed against Indiana. The Knicks, you know, they had a lot of solid bench pieces, but you would never know it when you only see like 7 or 8 guys a night. You had to have a deep team to win a championship, and some of his late series changes, it was more desperation than a proper adjustment. When you have the talent that the Knicks do with Brunson and Cat and Mikal Bridges and Josh Hart and all those guys, you can get away with things like that, but not having a deep and fleshed out team will get you burned in the playoffs. I'm disappointed a little more with the Thibodeau firing because the East is so wide open this year, with Tatum and Halliburton are down for the year, and the Bucks, they have no true second behind Giannis. And honestly, the Knicks, they didn't really have a plan after they fired Thibodeau. If you saw all the reports of who the Knicks were looking at, they were trying to get Jason Kidd at one point. It was just a really weird debacle. It feels more like the Knicks settled for Mike Brown. I would have given Thibs a short rope to begin the season, but I guess the Knicks felt like this was the best way to make their team get over the hump and improve in the offseason. As for Mike Brown keeping the Knicks as contenders, you know, Mike Brown, he's a very good coach, and, you know, combined with the talent they have and how weak the East is this year, the floor for the Knicks is the Eastern Conference Finals. I firmly expect the Knicks to snag the first seed. As like I said, the East, you know, even when you look at the standings of last year, the East leaves a lot to be desired. I don't think the Cavaliers are going to replicate the type of season that they had last year. The Pacers, they don't got Halliburton and Turner departed in free agency. The Celtics, they don't have Tatum, and they also traded away some key players. So really, the Knicks should cakewalk the East, and New York City should be prepared for a parade of ignorance unseen to mankind. Ben gives me quite a few good questions. He first starts off by asking, what is a location and time period you would like to see in Assassin's Creed? I would love to potentially see World War I era Europe. You know, you don't really see World War I covered in a lot of AAA titles. I know that might be a little too modern, but it would be different from what we're used to. Plus, I really miss the Saboteur. I tried to play 7 different Assassin's Creed games over the years, and I did not finish a single one of them, so this really isn't a series for me. But, you know, World War I era Europe, or even a Wild West setting, you know, those would be cool. I would definitely give those games a shot. Plus, we need more Wild West AAA games. Bad. Ben then goes on to say, why hasn't Deadliest Warrior been revived? Do we as a society not deserve peak television, and what is an episode you would want to see? We don't have any more Deadliest Warrior because of woke. You know, during the Bush administration, Spike TV was great, and then Obama was inaugurated, and then Spike TV has not been the same since. It was literally a man network. You had Deadliest Warrior, Mansers, Bellator MMA, 1,000 Ways to Die, Stripper Wella, TNA Impact, the list goes on. But because of woke and DEI, we just can't have nice things. No, all jokes aside though, seriously, why can't we have more fun networks like this? I mean, all those shows were just fun, silly shows. I'd actually use cable for something other than SNY. Spike TV had it all, and then it canceled it all to run Cops reruns 24/7. An episode I would like to see would be the Black Disciples, and most notably O Block versus ISIS. You know, Chief Keef already stated he wants to blow up New Jersey. You know, this is his own country. He lives in the United States, so imagine what he'd do to another country entirely. King Von alone, he would probably walk down the entire Islamic State. He was moving like Pol Pot in those streets. ISIS just, they wouldn't have any answer for that. And I've seen the ISIS training tapes, I'm not impressed. I can also somersault holding an assault rifle in 360p. Next, Ben asks, when are we going to marathon Terrifier? I don't want to watch Terrifier. I watched the first one, and that was an unsettling film. Also, I saw a black guy in one of the clips for Terrifier 2, and I'm not emotionally prepared for what the clown might do to him. I also heard people were throwing up watching the third, and honestly, look, I got a really weak stomach. I have a glass stomach, so I don't think we're going to marathon Terrifier anytime soon. He then goes on to ask if there was a Marvel vs. DC fighting game made by NetherRealm, what would be a character interaction you would love to see? I don't think we would get a game like that because at some point Warner Brothers would cancel it and do some type of tax write-off nonsense. But no, I know this is going to be a super conservative answer, but I'm going to say Batman and Spider-Man. And yeah, I know they're the two most popular superheroes and it just seems kind of like such a safe answer, but you know what? The way that these guys are like polar opposites yet extremely similar at the same time, with the way they not only both care deeply about their city but also the villains they face, so it'd be really interesting to see them collide. Finally, Ben says, why have all other platform fighters failed? This is a great question and I don't really have a full answer right now, but I think it's in the neighborhood of my Left 4 Dead 2 theory. I said back in chapter 69, The Revenge of October, that the style of the game Left 4 Dead 2 is, many have come along and emulated it, but no one has come close because they overcomplicate things. Super Smash Bros. Is the undisputed king of platform fighters, and quite a few games have come along trying to replicate this style to varying degrees of success, like PlayStation All-Stars or Multiverses, but none have stuck around for the long term. Multiverses shut down a few weeks ago. PlayStation All-Stars has yet to receive a sequel despite having so many more characters to fill out the roster. And you know what? I honestly have not heard a word about the Nick 2 games after they have released. They just come and go. I feel that when companies try to emulate another game that has a unique style, they try to do something different and it ends up burning the game in the long run. It's like following a recipe. If you mess up one of the ingredients, the entire dish is ruined. And honestly, if you look at all the platform fighters I named, they all do one or two things wrong and it just dilutes the entire product. Finally, let's end with the Dark Man. He says, being that No Malice from the Clips is 50 and still rapping better than ever before, is Andre 3000's excuse for being too old to rap valid anymore? Being that Raekwon and the Clips just dropped some heat and they are all over 50 years old, does Andre have a valid point to not rapping at his age anymore? I think that's valid because when you look at any sport or music or acting, you can definitely perform your way out of the all-time debate. I know people are looking at Malice and wondering what Andre 3000 is afraid of, but when you look at two guys who were consensus top 10 rappers in Eminem and Lil Wayne, you start to understand why Andre 3000 is afraid. Eminem, in my opinion, he's been extremely pedestrian post-recovery. None of his albums have been anything special since then. He's had some good singles, but otherwise, it's been a very forgettable catalog. Lil Wayne, I mean, come on, have you guys seen the way the Carter 6 has been slandered? It's like, what was he thinking on some of those songs? He cried, and most of Twitter cried, over him missing the Super Bowl, and then he goes and puts out this. It's like the NFL made the right choice for once. I do think it's a legit fear. Andre 3000, he's one of the greatest lyricists of all time, almost to the point where he feels underrated. I think he's in the top 10. His legacy might be really important to him. How people remember him might be really important to him. And putting out a stinker like Slim or Weezy have done, that could detract from his Hall of Fame career. Those two, to me, they've wrapped themselves out of the GOAT debate easily. Eminem also did the one thing that shows you're washed. He turned to transphobia, which is what every washed person does when they need some attention, like Dave Chappelle or the dude that's Adam Sandler's friend. Some might argue that Eminem has always done things like this in the past, but he was on the drugs, so he gets a bit of a pass. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. Andre 3000, he's even said on record that when it comes to new Outkast music, he's not a fan of the energy that Outkast had in the past, which is crazy to hear, but also understandable. He's not that person anymore. I get it. He's happy where he's at in life, and I love Outkast. I think Andre 3000 is fantastic, but I am content with him staying retired, especially as one of the greatest to ever do it. Alright, scholars, thank you so much for watching this chapter. It's great to be back doing boss. I know I said that in the last chapter, but it's great to be back. I'm having fun doing this. I have a lot of ground to make up in year 4. I know it's been grim for a while, but I promise I'm going to make up for it. So thank you so much for your patience. Thank you everyone for your support over this period. And here's to another year of Book of Showtime. Inshallah, I'll see you in the next chapter.